Have you ever stopped to think about the invisible rules, the ones governing the huge open seas,
Hmm.
the ancient legal frameworks that, quietly shaped global trade for centuries and still echo today?
It's really quite remarkable, isn't it, how foundational some of these old legal documents are.
Yeah.
They basically carved out the pathways for global commerce, often in ways we just don't see anymore.
Absolutely. So today we're embarking on a deep dive into one of these incredible foundational texts, the Book of the Consulate of the Sea.
Or, in the original Catalan, Llibre del Consolat de Mar.
Exactly. And look, this isn't just some dusty old book you'd find buried in an
Oh,
archive.
not at all. Think of it more like a groundbreaking collection, a huge compendium of maritime law that pretty much governed trade across the entire Mediterranean for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
It started in Valencia, but it wasn't just local. It got translated into loads of languages and directly served as a blueprint for modern international maritime law. It even pushed aside earlier rules like the Amalfi Tables.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack this thing. We want to uncover its fascinating origins, get into the controversies around how it was created.
And there are definitely controversies.
Right. Then explore its huge influence across continents, across centuries, and figure out why its principles are still, well, surprisingly relevant.
Yeah, you'll find some unexpected facts, that's for sure.
Definitely. Get ready for a shortcut to being really well informed about a key piece of maritime history.
So let's start right at the beginning. What was the book, The Consul of the Sea? Its core genius, really, was its purpose.
Okay.
Its main achievement was being the first major work to actually gather up all these scattered maritime laws and customs from, well, everywhere.
Like a big melting pot of laws.
Exactly. Before this, you had Roman, Greek, Byzantine, Rhodian, Italian, French, Spanish rights, all sort of floating around separately. This book pulled them together.
That sounds like a massive undertaking, pulling all those threads together. But it wasn't created in a vacuum, right? Were there existing rules it built on? Maybe from places like Barcelona.
Absolutely. You're right to mention Barcelona. They definitely had earlier local rules like the Ordenaciones de Ribera from 1258.
What were those exactly?
Think of them like early harbor police regulations, keeping things orderly right there in the port.
Okay, local stuff.
Right. But the consulate went much, much further. What's interesting is that the first time we see a mention of sea consuls, the judges applying these laws in Barcelona is 1282. That's just 1 year before Valencia set up its first official consulate of the sea in 1283. So you can see the pieces were coming together around the same time.
And Valencia's consulate got a royal stamp of approval right away, didn't it? What did having royal jurisdiction actually mean for it?
Precisely. King Peter III of Aragon, a very shrewd ruler, decided to apply Barcelona's existing maritime customs, the Cosquings de Mar, when he set up Valencia's first consulate.
Smart move.
Yeah. And as the scholar Arcadi Garcia Sanz points out, Valencia's consulate had royal jurisdiction from day one. This meant it wasn't just some local court. It had the crown's authority behind it.
Ah, so its rulings carried more weight.
Way more weight and prestige. That royal backing was a game changer, honestly. It really influenced how other consulates were set up later in the 15th century.
But that must have given it a huge head start, a real legal powerhouse from the get-go. So what was the deeper legal tradition underpinning all these customs?
Well, they were based on something called the usus et consuetudimaris.
Okay.
And this wasn't just a list of rules. It was more like a living legal and maritime tradition for the Western Mediterranean, a mix of long-standing practices and actual written legal ideas.
And where did that come from?
It was documented in Catalonia pretty early, 1231 in Vic, and it got formally included in the custom of Tortosa by 1272. The thinking is it came into the Iberian Peninsula through Barcelona's own maritime customs, the customs of Ribera. Shows how law travels with trade, you know.
Yeah, like the sea itself, crossing borders. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Almost like a historical detective story. The origin of the book itself, this isn't straightforward, is it? It's a proper historical mystery.
It really is. The General Encyclopedia of the Sea points out there's this big ongoing debate. You've got three powerful maritime regions, all fiercely claiming they produced it first.
Who are the contenders?
You've got France, specifically Marseille,
Yeah.
then Spain, with claims from Valencia, Barcelona, and Tortosa, and Italy, mainly Pisa.
Wow, a three-way fight for the credit.
Exactly. And this wasn't just scholars arguing in libraries. It reflected the intense competition and, frankly, the pride among these big port cities. Law was power. Geopolitical and commercial power.
Okay, so let's hear the arguments. Who makes the case for Barcelona?
Well, a really key figure is Antonio de Capmany Montpalau, writing in the late 18th century. After studying it deeply, he concluded it was written in Barcelona probably between 1258 and 1266.
That early?
Yeah. He acknowledged there might have been some Pisan influence on bits of it, but he completely rejected the idea it originated in Italy overall.
And what was Pisa's argument back?
That came from a Sardinian scholar, Domenico Azun. He argued for Pisa. His reasoning was, well, pretty logical for the time. Pisa was this massive maritime power. Surely, he thought, they must have needed and developed their own comprehensive sea laws to run their empire.
Makes sense. Okay, so then the French scholar Pardisus weighs in.
Yes, Pardisus. In his big study, he took issue with Azun's Pisan idea. He was convinced the first copy was definitely Catalan, not Latin, and he figured it was handwritten in Barcelona.
So he agreed with Capmany on the location, but not the date?
Exactly. He put the date much later, somewhere between 1340 and 1400. So, still disagreement.
The plot thickens, and then another scholar, Wildscott, adds a crucial clue about the date. Something about bills of exchange.
Precisely. Wildscott noticed something really important. The original compilation of the Consulate doesn't mention bills of exchange at all.
And why is that significant?
Because by the mid-13th century, bills of exchange were, well, everywhere. They were vital tools for international trade.
Ah, I see.
Their complete absence in the earliest form of the text strongly suggests the book must have been compiled before they became common, so before the mid-13th century.
Which pushes the date back again, supporting an earlier Catalan origin.
Right. It adds another layer to the mystery, but definitely leans towards an earlier date, likely in Catalonia.
Okay, so let's circle back to the Spanish claims. Valencia, you mentioned, has a strong case for its influence.
Absolutely. Valencia's claim really emphasizes that many core customs weren't just used there, but actually consolidated there, thanks in part to that early royal jurisdiction we talked about.
Right.
So these established Valentine customs were then frequently copied and adopted when new consulates were set up elsewhere. It highlights Valencia's role in shaping how the laws were actually used day to day.
And Barcelona's specific claim, Capmany, the scholar we mentioned, had more to say about that 1502 Barcelona edition, didn't he? Sounds like that caused some confusion.
He did. Capmany's point was quite nuanced. He argued that, yes, the first few chapters of that widely known 1502 printed edition were about Valencian regulations.
Okay.
But, he claimed, the vast bulk of the book, the main body of laws, was actually compiled from Barcelona's own earlier customs, which they called the Free Consulate of the Sea.
Ah, so two different sources kind of mashed together in the printing.
That was his argument. He believed Barcelona's customs were compiled and printed first, and then the Valencian ordinations got tacked onto the beginning by the printers later, which understandably led to all this historical confusion about where the whole thing really started.
Fascinating. So whoever gets the final credit for writing the first draft, its influence is just undeniable. How did this one book manage to spread so far and become such a standard?
Well, it was mainly powered by the expansion of the Catalan Navy and their commercial dominance at the time.
So where the ships went, the law followed.
Pretty much. Wherever Catalan merchants traded, their legal framework went with them. This made sure the Book of the Consulate of the Sea wasn't just, respected, but actually adopted across the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
And its influence even reached up into the Atlantic. It became a kind of universal rule book for maritime activity.
And not just respected, but translated everywhere, right?
Absolutely. From the original Catalan, it got translated into Italian, French, English, Castilian, basically all the major trading languages.
Yeah.
For centuries, it was the undisputed go-to source for merchant marine law in so many countries.
Can you give us some specific examples, like concrete ways it impacted things?
Sure. So one key part was an appendix, an annex, that contained Barcelona's 1435 rules on marine insurance.
Ah, insurance, crucial for trade.
Very crucial. And because the consulate circulated so widely, it helped spread these early insurance practices all over Europe. It basically laid the groundwork.
And how long did it stay dominant?
It remained the main code of maritime law across the Med until France brought in its own big code, the Ordonnance de la Marine, in 1681.
Wow, that's a long run.
It is. And in Spain itself, it stayed the law until 1829. Only then was it replaced by a commercial code, which was itself inspired by French law. Some European countries were still using parts of these ordinances well into the 18th century.
Incredible longevity for any legal text. But what about more recently? Does it still crop up today in surprising ways?
It does, surprisingly often. Its practical value just endured. Sir Travers Twiss, a major legal scholar, actually translated it into English in 1874, specifically because it was still useful.
In 1874, wow.
Yeah, and get this. In the early 20th century, a U.S. court actually threw out a legal claim because it wasn't supported by the principles in the Consulate of the Sea.
No way, in a U.S. court.
Yep. And even later, the Court of Appeal in Alexandria, Egypt, quoted a chapter from the book in a judgment in March 1937.
1937, that's amazing.
It really shows how its core ideas kept resonating across different legal systems in different times.
Truly remarkable that it was still being cited in courts from the U.S. to Egypt well into the 20th century. It speaks volumes about the wisdom in it. So, how did this masterpiece evolve? What were the key versions that shaped its legacy?
Well, the first sort of significant collection of these sea customs, the foundational Valencian version, seems to have been put together between 1320 and 1330.
Okay, the early Valencian stage.
The Majorca plays a really important role.
How so?
The Majorcan edition from 1345 was a key adaptation of those Valencian customs. This happened after Majorca surrendered to King Peter the Ceremonious and got his own Consulate de Mar.
Ah, so they adapted the Valencian model.
Exactly. A lawyer named Huguet Boras drafted the judicial rules for Valencia's court and then rewrote the Valencian customs, creating the capitals del Consulate de Mar de Majorca, a crucial step in spreading the ideas.
And then we get to what's considered the definitive version, the masterpiece.
That would be the Valencian Consulate de Mar from 1407. It's really seen as the high point of medieval maritime law, a real icon of Valencian legal history.
Is it still around?
Amazingly, yes. The original manuscript, complete with beautiful miniature illustrations by Domingo Crespi, is still kept safe in the municipal archives of Valencia. A cultural treasure as much as a legal one.
And then, of course, everything changed with the printing press.
Right. That was a total game changer. It led to the first known printed edition coming out of Valencia sometime between 1436 and 1484. That just allowed the principles to spread much faster and wider than ever before.
Okay, let's zoom in on that Barcelona edition of 1502. You mentioned it adds to the complexity, but it sounds really significant too. What made it so important?
It's definitely a cornerstone edition. Remember, King Pedro the Ceremonious had granted Barcelona its consulate, based on the Majorcan model, which itself came from Valencia.
Right, that chain of adaptation.
So this printed edition, from August 14, 1502, is important because it was so comprehensive and printed, making it widely available.
What did it cover?
Pretty much everything. Part 1 laid out how to choose the consuls and judges in Valencia, their duties, legal procedures. It even had specific rules for shipments to Alexandria, though those bits were later dropped.
And Part 2?
That contained the main body of laws from 1343. The first chunk dealt with the generally accepted customs of maritime trade, the real nitty-gritty. The second part covered things like piracy, armed naval expeditions, convoys, even early rules on maritime insurance and bills of exchange, which were becoming vital.
Sounds incredibly detailed.
It was. It even includes the oath of office for lawyers in Majorca, decreed way back by James I of Aragon, before 1275. It shows how it was formalizing the whole legal process around maritime trade.
Okay, finally, that Molineux-Ribrezé's edition from 1914 sounds like a massive scholarly project.
Oh, it was a huge undertaking. It's seen as one of the most complete versions ever compiled. It didn't just include the ancient customs, it gathered all the later contributions, commentaries, everything that had built up over centuries.
Like the ultimate edition.
Pretty much. It had the Valencian consul regulations, the Barcelona customs, the rules for armed ships, different chronicles, those crucial Barcelona insurance ordinances, other court documents. It's really the definitive historical record of the whole evolving legal tradition.
So this book didn't just spring out of nowhere. It built on centuries of legal thinking. Let's talk about that legal ecosystem, what came before the consulate. Where do the roots of sea law really go back to?
You're absolutely right. It has deep, deep roots. The earliest known laws touching on sea matters go back thousands of years.
Like how far back?
Think Babylonian Index, 18th century BC, or Phoenician customs around 2000 BC. These ancient rules got picked up and adapted by the Greeks and Romans. Rhodes, for instance, directly used Phoenician laws. The Greeks even had colonies like Empires, trading constantly by sea, following their own Greek customs. It's a long, long lineage.
Fascinating. Millennia of development. So what were some of the more direct predecessors in the Mediterranean that likely influenced the consulate more immediately?
Well, it probably drew, maybe indirectly, from Italian sources, like the Pisan Constitutum Iusis from 1161, and the Breve Consularis from 1162, and that Latin text, Consuetudo Maris, from the early 13th century. But even earlier, you had the Tabula Amalfitana, the Amalfi tables, codified in 1010. Amalfi was a huge maritime power, and their tables were really pioneering for organizing sea commerce.
Right. The Amalfi tables are famous.
Then you had the customs of Trani from 1063, later adapted by Fermo. These were all regional efforts trying to bring some order to the waves, you know.
And Barcelona was doing its own thing locally even as the consulate was emerging.
Yes. King James Arras had already marked out Barcelona's Ribera, the seaside district, back in 1243 for maritime stuff. Their local rules were written down in 1258 in the Carta Consulatus Ripari Barcanoni.
But those were mainly local harbor rules.
Initially, yes, more about local administration than broad maritime law. But crucially, Barcelona's consuls started officially naming consuls de mar sea consuls in 1282. That's a big step towards the kind of formal institution the consulate would represent.
Okay, so the consulate clearly drew from this rich past. But then how widely did its laws spread and influence what came after it, even outside the Mediterranean?
Well, many historians think its laws were hugely influential on later European codes. You see echoes of its principles adopted quite early, maybe even 9th century, way up in the Baltic and North Sea.
Really? That far north?
Yeah, contributing to codes like the Waterrecht or the Laws of Wisby, which were published in 1407 and used by the big trading group, the Hanseatic League.
What about other famous sea laws, like the Rules of Oleron or Britain's Black Book of the Admiralty? How did they fit in?
The rules of Oleron, their origin is really debated. Some say Edward I, some Richard I, maybe even Eleanor of Aquitaine way back in 1160.
A bit murky, then.
Very. And initially, Atlantic sailors and Mediterranean sailors didn't necessarily talk much directly. So there might not have been much early influence between those Atlantic codes and the consulate.
But eventually the Mediterranean laws took over.
That's the key point for legal history, yes. The really comprehensive and effective laws developed in the Med, like the consulate, eventually just became more important than the Atlantic ones. They sort of replaced them as the dominant framework.
Why was that?
Mainly because Mediterranean trade was just so much bigger and more complex for so many centuries. They needed more advanced legal tools to manage it all. The Black Book of the Admiralty in Britain also goes back to the 12th century, showing these things developed in parallel. But ultimately, the consulate had a much wider, longer-lasting international impact.
Right. So, wrapping this up, this deep dive into the Book of the Consulate of the Sea really shows what a foundational text it was.
Absolutely.
It managed to weave together all these different maritime customs from ancient times. It sparked centuries of debate about who actually wrote it.
Still debated today.
Still debated. And maybe most importantly, it laid down the groundwork for how we still understand and try to govern the seas today.
It's more than just laws on paper, isn't it? It's really a testament to that deep human need for order, for structure, even when you're dealing with something as wild and unpredictable as the ocean.
Yeah.
It shows how vital these frameworks were for connecting the world and allowing trade to flourish.
Exactly. So here's something to think about. How could this one collection of rules put together in medieval times for trade on just one sea, the Mediterranean, become such a global, long-lasting blueprint for international law? What does that tell us about that basic human drive to create order, even when facing the vast unknown? And, how much of our modern world, everything from global supply chains to arguments over shipping lanes, is still being shaped by these really deep historical currents flowing from centuries ago?
It definitely gives you something profound to mull over.